thanks for the invitation and good afternoon to everyone. I will share my presentation. Yes, here. Yes, there is. This is the content of my presentation, and the first issue I will address is the COVID and the school system. In the context of the world, COVID-19 has led to closure of schools in most countries in the world, as we have seen already, and has interrupted school attendance of students in 2020 and mainly 2021 also. In-class education and teaching has been replaced and continues through online teaching with several and important challenges and impacts on students, teachers, and parents, and also families. Online teaching needs a virtual curricula, effective teacher support, and technological tools. Another main factor for effective virtual education is family support. Not assisting to school has an impact on learning, on dropout rate, and access to higher education later on. Sorry, this is not advancing. Let me see. The presentation, now yes. Schools in Latin American and Caribbean countries have been closed on average for longer periods than in OECD countries. In Chile, in 2020, 56% of homes had access to internet and 30% had access only through mobile phones. There is less connectivity in low-income homes and rural sectors. Family support is less for students whose parents have limited education and resources. For more vulnerable students, schools are important for education and also for integral development of students. And temporary suspension of classes, but for long periods, have an impact on increasing inequalities on learning and social issues. In Chile, an estimation in 2020 reflects that students would lose on average 88% of learning in a year. Students from low SES would lose 95% of learning, and from high SES, 64%. Virtual education can only mitigate 12% effect of loss in learning, 6% for low SES students. And there is an increase in dropout rate by 43% related to previous year. In terms of school closures and direct effects, lower learning effects on social aspects and school stimulus difficulties in the development of practical and soft competencies, increase in dropout rate and school exclusion, decrease in school support for integral development of students as nutrition, psychological support, and social assistance, effects on mental health of students and teacher difficulties related to lack of previous competencies for virtual education and relations, strong feelings of overwhelmed and stress, longer hours of work, need to prepare appropriate material, and need to communicate and cooperate with parents, not only children. In terms of indirect effects, family impact for various different situations with effects on children and youth. Therefore, families don't have enough time or resources for supporting remote learning. Economic effect. Parents, mainly mothers, have to stop working for taking care of their children. Increase in child labor. Increase in violence and abuse situations, Children and youth might be more exposed to violence and gender violence, improving probability for leaving school. Increase in social inequalities. Leaving school has an impact on future income, negative effect on future economic and labor opportunities, increases risk of poverty and social exclusion in the future, and there is a higher effect for vulnerable sectors, or low SES, decrease in labor productivity and economic growth. In terms of opportunities and challenges for education recovery, in terms of the context, return to in-school and in-presence teaching varies across countries. Countries should be prepared to alternate between three types of schooling in the near future: in-school teaching with appropriate health measures, hybrid schooling with a mix of in-presence and remote schooling, and remote schooling through a variety of means. The recovery of education systems will be vital to the future recovery of societies as a whole. The pandemic has exacerbated existing inequities in education as it has in wider society. Providing equitable opportunities for cognitive, social, and emotional development is a fundamental obligation for all students to succeed in their learning. Students' cognitive, social, and emotional educational needs are at the core during and after the pandemic, with the need of help of their families and the active support of teachers, educational institutions, and also the wider community. Teachers are more effective when their needs for health, safety, and well-being are recognized and addressed. The best conditions for achieving these goals occur when all partners involved in education recovery work in collaboration. In terms of the principles for recovery, for an effective and equitable education, we find to provide targeted support to meet students' learning and social emotional needs, co-design a robust digital learning infrastructure with teachers and stakeholders. The pandemic has shown that education systems need to have a strong digital learning infrastructure. This infrastructure needs to be developed and implemented in collaboration with teachers. Effective and inclusive digital platforms should offer resources for in-school and out-of-school learning experiences to address inequity that blights many learning's experience of education and improve learning effectiveness for all. Empower teachers to exercise their professionalism and benefit from professional learning opportunities. Many teachers responded to the pandemic by creating their own just-in-time professional development. Many innovative and creative learning engagements have been created, highlighting the future potential of IT-based pedagogical approaches. A lesson of the pandemic is that teachers need to feel empowered to exert their professionalism in the use of technology as part of their teaching. This involves the integration of technology in all teacher training courses. Encourage a collaborative culture of innovation. Some aspects to be considered: new ways of combining in-school and remote teaching and learning, new approaches to organizing schooling and envisioning teachers' roles, new ways of embracing technology to free teachers' time so they can better support their students' cognitive and social emotional learning, effective ways to foster social interaction remotely, and new ways to engage parents in supporting their children's learning, and learn from national and international evidence. In terms, as we all know, this is the third issue, that is challenges and opportunities for education, related to inclusion and equity in education. As we all know, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by the United Nations member states, defined the 17 SDG and stated a new vision for education, which is to transform lives through education, recognizing its important role and as the main driver for development and for all SDG. This new vision is reflected in Goal 4, guaranteeing an inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. The vision is inspired in a humanistic conception of education and development based on human rights and dignity, social justice, inclusion, protection, cultural, linguistic, and ethnic diversity and responsibility. Inclusion and equity in education, and through it, are key for a transformation education. There is a compromise on facing any form of exclusion and marginality, disparities, and unequal access, participation, and learning outcomes. And in Goal 5, there is a recognition of the importance of gender equality for reaching the right of education for all. These are the 17 goals. And last, in terms of a response of UNESCO in 2020, they launched the COVID-19 Global Education Coalition to help countries tackle content and connectivity gaps and facilitate inclusive learning opportunities for children and youth during the period of sudden and unprecedented educational disruption. Specifically, the Global Education Coalition aims to help countries in mobilizing resources and implementing innovative and context-appropriate solutions to provide education remotely, leveraging high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech approaches, seek equitable solutions and universal access, ensure coordinated responses and avoid overlapping efforts, and facilitate the return of students to school when they reopen to avoid an upsurge in dropout rates. And finally, the main challenge for inclusion and equity in education is to advance to education institutions that constitute inclusive and equitable spaces for student, professional, academic, and social development, eliminating visible and invisible barriers with the participation and compromise of the whole education community for an effective right to education, provide quality education, and facilitate lifelong learning for all. Thank you very much.